I am
Well, thank
very,
you so much for having me here. I'm excited to talk about my book.
I am so happy to have you here, talking to me for a little bit about your books. And welcome to the Bookish Resistance. And yeah, tell me about your writing journey. How did you become a published author?
So I'm an independently published author. This is actually Cinnamon Rolls and Villainy is my fourth book. I started in 2020 after I'd been writing for, with a series that I'd been writing since I was like 15. So I'd been writing it for like 14 years, in the dystopian field. And then I needed a break from the dystopian world to put um, I always write and like my stories end up being very political, but I needed a degree of distance. And so I ended up coming up with Ace and Laura and their characters, and then the world and the storyline kind of blossomed around them. So I sort of switched gears and went back to my first love, which is fantasy.
Very cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the world building. What is your process for creating different things within a fantasy world?
So I kind of let the world develop around the characters. I'm very character focused. But with this, I really wanted a world where I could have a diverse set of characters who could have the freedom to really be themselves. And in Cinnamon Rolls and Villain, you have that. I mean, you have like the villains and the groups that are not supportive of that, but then the areas that they are in their life, it's this very diverse place where people who are queer and disabled and everything like that can have the ability to be accepted for who they are and have that found family. And that was really my motivation of um, for creating the world of Averden and the surrounding worlds that go on with it. As I wanted just to be have this background for my diverse characters to kind of thrive in. And that was where I went from there. And then I kind of do world building as I go. So, like, I'm a big believer of like, yes, you can know all these things about the world, but readers only really need to know what they need to know to have like to interact with the characters and everything and understand to be immersed in it. They don't need to know every single detail about everything unless it's relevant. And so I kind of world build as I go, and as I run into questions, I go back as I'm writing. I go back and I like resolve those questions and make it clearer. And I use like a beta reading process and stuff like that. Like, was this clear about my world? Was it not? And that's kind of my process.
Very cool. I love that, unlike many of the fantasy books out there, in this one, she's the badass. She's the morally gray. She's the, knife to his throat. And he is, well, he also makes cinnamon rolls. The book is called Cinnamon Rolls and Villainy. And I absolutely love that. Maybe because that's a dynamic between my husband and me. But,
Yeah, same.
I'm the mean one.
Same.
Yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
mean one. He's the one everyone likes. And, I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that. Um, I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And she is fighting, to be on the throne. And she doesn't much question about how she gets there, and
Mhm.
I love that. I love that in a main character. And tell me about where Ace and Laura are going, because I already see that there's a next book, which I'm very excited about. So
Mhm.
what is next for them after all that happens in Cinnamon Rolls and Villainy?
Oh, so not to give away too much to anyone who
No, no,
hasn't
no.
read the book. So if hopefully you've read the book, so I'll give little spoilers because a little bit. But so the next book's called Chocolate Pudding and Wicked Queens. And anyone who's read the end of the book kind of might know like where that like Wicked Queens is coming from. And those who read the first book also know like, oh, cinnamon rolls is what Ace is best known for, but chocolate pudding is her favorite dessert. And so that gets brought in. And of course, we see this slow burn continuing because at the end of that book, we see the slow burn slowly building into a much hotter burn. So book two is much spicier than book one was. A lot of spice in it. And then there's other things like we get to see there was a dragon egg in book one. And so in book two, we have a little dragon baby, and that covers a lot of stuff. And just Ace um, delving more into his background and his power, his shadow power that he has, and discovering more of that. And Laura um, trying to keep her throne from people who would want to take it from her. And dealing with a lot, and he wants to protect her, and so he's delving into his power and learning how to harness his power while wrestling with not wanting to lose his goodness. And there's just a lot of moving parts that, like, I introduced in book one that are really going to come to head in book two, and I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I really enjoyed these two. And I do love, I mean, there are funny moments, there are more serious moments, but I do love that there's some substantial character development. And, I love that you blended the action and the banter and the character development. I'm very much a character reader.
Mm,
If I can't root for the character, then why am I reading this? And
yeah.
it doesn't mean I have to like the character, but I have to like be invested in them, and so I appreciate that very much. Where do you find inspiration? Like, what inspired you to write about these two? Like, where does that come from?
So it was very much um, a dynamic of wanting to see those two personalities of like flipping the gender bent. Like I do like the enemies to lovers, but I've never loved it the way that like a lot of people do. And I think it's just because I'm very much more drawn to like the morally gray female and um the softer masculine, and seeing that in literature. And that's my queerness coming up. That's my my non-binariness and my gender fluidness coming into play of these characters, of like wanting to see that reflected more on page. And I've seen elements of them, like, I don't know, in the Cruel Prince you kind of get that with like Carden and Jude, but I haven't seen a lot of books out there that were like this. And I was like, hey, this is the book that I want to read, so I'm gonna have to write it. And so it kind of just developed. And I did some like cosplaying with these two characters when I first started, like on TikTok, along like when I first started. That's where it stemmed, was just like playing around with some cosplay and stuff like that, and with these two characters. And then I was like, hey, there's a story here, and I was able to like sit down and outline, which I'm not a big outliner. Um, but I was able to like sit down and actually outline this book. And I'm like, hey, I need to, I was supposed to be working on a different project. I'm like, I have to write this because this dynamic is too good. And then I created the characters that are surround them, and, Peregrine and Bronwyn, and just was like, I have to write these characters. And so, that's kind of where it started at.
Yeah, I'm very glad you did, because this is a book that yeah, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I've read a couple of, where it's the female character in the book that is, morally gray and all that. But, it doesn't happen much often. Kind of it's a trope that the guy is the one who, is the
Mhm.
mean one and the girl is the sunshine and whatever. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book and I'm looking forward to the next one. Other than that, do you have any other maybe ideas in mind? Are there only going to be two books in this
So
series, or are there
there's at
more?
least three. There's at least three books. Yeah,
Okay.
it's at least a
I'm
trilogy. I never like to say, because I am a bit of a pantser, so it is always possible that I could get to like book three and not be able to wrap it up. I don't think that's going to happen, but there is always the possibility that there could be more. But there's at least three books because it doesn't end in book two.
Yes,
Book
that
two
is
is almost done with the rough draft, so it's enough that I'm like, I know what's happening in book two. And how it ends and everything like that, and it's not done. The story's definitely not done.
um who are your inspirations as far as writers, and not just within, fantasy, but like who do you like to go to?
Mm. So I think my biggest inspiration for like true fantasy goes back to like my love of Lord of the Rings when I was like growing up, because that's where I really started writing, was with Lord of the Rings. Um, And then so no, some of that like traditional like dragons and griffins and hard fantasy. Like I grew up reading, the Lord of the Rings, and I grew up reading Aragon, and you know, just these like hard fantasy novels that you grew up with, the big dragons, and those were a lot of it. And then the romantasy genre, of course, I've read like the big ones and things like that. I loved the element of like, and Fourth Wing, what really drew me was like that element of the main character having chronic pain. And I feel like that really inspired me for this, because I was like, oh, we can have fantasy novels like people like me, because I have chronic pain. And it's like it makes you feel like, hey, I could ride a dragon. I'm not this like, skinny, super fit person, but hey, and my hips hurt all the time, but hey, I could ride a dragon. And that was really eye opening to me for like going and writing books too with what I wanted to do with my characters. And that's what you get when you have Peregrine, who is, uses a cane, but they are a Griffin rider, and you have Ace, who also struggles with chronic pain, and Tavish, who's a navigator who's blind, and his guide dog, and Xylee, who has mutism and very very extensive autism, and Laura, who also has some autism. So there's not one of my characters who don't have some of like the struggles, and I really want it to be a book that anyone who picks it up can be like, oh, I can be a hero, and I can go on epic adventures, and I can have epic love, and I can find a family of people who love me and accept me exactly as I am, and I don't have to hide that, and I don't have to, you know, like overcome it, or whatever, or like put it aside. Like obviously I overcome it and I thrive with it, but it doesn't have to magically go away in order for me to have value. And I can have value right in this moment, and that was a very big like inspiration for me to see that and like move forward with writing my own books that are like that.
That's so important, the representation, to look at a book, read a book and say, yeah, I can go on the great adventure and save the world. And whatever I have going on, like I have, chronic joint pain. My younger son is autistic, and it is important for him to see himself, and we all deal with something, and especially if you have chronic pain or some kind of neurodivergence, it is heartwarming to find that representation. I'm in my 50s, so I read for enjoyment. But I think that a lot of younger people would appreciate, the representation. They don't see
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I used to read romances and I never saw anybody brown on the cover, like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess only, some people can find real love. But, um, but no, when I started reading your book, I thought, okay, this is going to be fun and this is going to be entertaining. And I also found like so much substance, which I absolutely love. And we'll be thrilled to have you in our March Bookish Resistance Club. And what would you like readers to take with them after they read your book?
Oh, I even like close my book at the end. Like, what do you do now? And it's so much of my book, like you said, has substance, and there's stuff that like really reflects the real world and what is going on. And I hope that readers take with it like this sense of like I have power to do things in this world. Like whoever I am, whatever I am, I have power. I'm of worth, and I have power to be able to do things in this world. There's a lot of evil in this world, and there's a lot of things that are worth fighting for. And I just hope those are like the true like fantasy stories that we used to like in how like Samwise Gamgee says in the Lord of the Rings. There's some good in this world, and it's still worth fighting for. And I hope people take that from that book. Just see themselves reflected and be like, hey, they can fight, and so can I. And just take that. from the page because for me books fantasy books are revolutionary and um, that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be this eternal struggle of good and evil, and that we have to unfortunately face a lot of the time on our own. But so I just hope that they find strength in that and inspiration to move forward.
That's lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining me, for taking time out of your day. I really do appreciate it. And yes, we will be seeing Chante Campbell's book, Cinnamon Rolls and Villainy, in our March Bookish Resistance Club. And, maybe we'll have you back when the next one's out and chat some more. I'd really appreciate that.
Well, I thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to talk to you.
Of course. You take care and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.